Welcome to today's stream. So the plan for today's stream is we're going to work on requesting balance via SMS. So for those of you who haven't joined before, this app is basically a money manager for kids so that if they can't get their own bank account and you're sort of holding the money for them, you can track deposits and spending and things like that. So the UI looks something like this, where you can see the account balance and then basically see all the transactions. You can do a deposit transaction, you can spend some money, and there's a place where you can import from a CSV if that's what you're doing, because that's what I'm doing. The source is up there. All the information's on the Twitch channel. You can also head over to my website, tedmyoung.com, and you can see KidBank and all the info for what it's about, why I'm doing it, and so on is all there. So today, as I mentioned, we're going to, let me go back to my Trello. The Trello board is also open, and you can view that if you'd like. And so we're going to request balance via SMS, basically a text message. So the idea is that we want a request to come in from a known phone number that says balance or something like that, and then the system will respond with the current balance. Since this involves credentials that are worth money, right? So even though it's relatively inexpensive, what is it? It's like 7/100ths of a cent or something like that per text message. It still costs money. So at least for the Twilio service I'm using. So we're going to start with that. But that means that I don't want those credentials in GitHub. I don't want those basically in any repository. I want them to be read from either a local file that doesn't get uploaded to a version control system, or from an environment variable. So that way when it runs locally, it reads my local one, and when it goes into production in Heroku, I can set basically relatively secure environment variables, and so that way I don't have to put it into a file that's in version control. And that's a fairly standard way of doing this kind of thing, externalizing configuration, not so that it's not only just particular per environment, but also to keep sort of secrets out of repositories, because that's just a bad idea. All right. So where we left off last time, we can go ahead and look at the code. All the tests ran, and so I was just playing around with externalizing the configuration. So what I did was I wanted to have a set of properties that were available sort of globally. Since Twilio is something that I'm going to use in multiple applications, that way it's not just particular to this application, but it's something I can use globally. And so Spring Boot has a number of ways of storing properties. And one of those that basically is something that is used for development is this one here, the Spring Boot DevTools properties. When DevTools is active, which is usually what you're going to be doing when you're doing development, it'll read it in from this directory. And so this is basically your home directory on Mac or Linux. On Windows, it would be your user home. And so the file name is this .springboot devtools properties. And so I already put my secret authentication and keys in there, so that way I can read those from the application. Twilio also has some test credentials, so that way you can send out messages without it actually sending it, and therefore without it costing you, but it looks like it's going to the real thing. So there are a bunch of other places we can put the properties. We can basically put them as command line arguments. We can load them in from either Java system properties or OS environment variables. So what we're going to do is when we're running this locally, we're going to use this option, right? Spring Boot DevTools properties. And when it's running in Heroku or maybe some other environment, it will at least initially start out with the OS environment variables because we can set those in Heroku. It's not something that we want to put like in a properties file, right? Because that can get accidentally checked in. And so we definitely don't want to do that. There are other secret mechanisms, but we're not going to look at those for a while. So since I already have these properties here, what I wanted to do was make sure that I could read them properly. And so I basically wrote a quick test. So let's take a look at how we'd read in the properties. So there are two properties that we're concerned with here. One is what's called the account SID, or SID, and the other one is the authentication token. This one is a bit less secret than this one. The auth token is really the private thing. This one is sort of the account, basically the account ID. Now, one thing about the naming that I use for so naming can get a little tricky, and so and naming is one of my things that I think is really important. In reality, if you look at the Twilio stuff, you see that it uses account SID and auth token, right? And it has this underscore, and they're all capped. That's because these are constants. But even so, like sort of that's the way they're spelled, and SID would be all uppercase. So what I wanted to do is sometimes you'll see like if they're all uppercase, you'll see like this, right, where all the letters of an acronym are uppercase. I don't like that because it makes it hard to read, especially when things get camel cased in Java. So like you lowercase the first letter, and then you're stuck with like this lowercase letter and a bunch of uppercase letters, and it looks really weird. So for example, if I had a property that was year to date summary, right? Well, that's not the right name for a variable because a variable name has to start with a lowercase letter. So okay, so then I lowercase the y, and now it looks really weird, right? Is this some YTDS summary or something? And it becomes very hard to read. Whereas if we started off with saying, okay, all acronyms are just like a regular word, so you initial uppercase it and then the rest of it is lowercase, it looks like this. And then to make it into a proper variable with a lowercase initial letter, it looks like that, and that's much more readable. So that's sort of a general guideline of my naming. Whenever you have acronyms or initialisms, treat it like a word, initial uppercase letter, the rest are lowercase, and that'll make things a lot easier. Now, what's cool about the configuration properties is that, so you'll notice that this is camel case, right? So it's account, and there's no underscore or anything, and then SID. So the word break is basically here between the T and the S. And what's nice is in Spring, it will automatically figure that out. So it will automatically, where is it? I just had the reference for that. I'll have to find it. But basically the idea is that in the property file, it could be account SID like that, or it could be account SID like that, or it could be account underscore SID like that. And it will all basically collapse into a name that looks like this. And so that's nice. So that way, no matter sort of what your standard is in your config properties, it will convert it to the right thing. And so it just works. So because I have this marked with configuration, this will be processed by Spring during startup. And so basically I have this configuration class will be managed by Spring, and it will get bootstrapped because we have in our application, we have Spring Boot application, and it'll automatically read this configuration file because it's in the same package. And what I can also do is say this is configuration properties with a prefix of Twilio. So that means I have in my properties file, it would be Twilio dot, and then the rest of the config thing. and it will automatically do the right thing for that. So to write a test for this, I can actually go to my application tests, and I can basically do assert that my Twilio config, which is injected, get auth token that it's not blank. And so what's nice is that'll handle, basically confirm for me that when it injects this Twilio config, that it loads those properties correctly from my file. And so if I run this test, I'll just run this one. And this is a full-on integration test because this is a Spring Boot test. So it'll do all of the startup and loading of things. And there we go. And so this test passed. So basically, I know that my configuration file was loaded properly and that the contents of these two specific properties are not blank. I don't want to display them because those are my private SID and token. So that's all good. And now if I want to use test one, I can go ahead and go into my application properties. So that's in my resources, application properties. And so I can say Twilio dot, what was it, account SID. And I can create some fake account, SID, and Twilio dot auth, what was it, auth token equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so now if I go into my test, I can say is not blank and is equal to whatever we put in here. So this one, I don't need to bother testing this one. So what I'm trying to show here is the sort of priority order of loading configuration files. So let me run this. Okay, so the priority is if it's in a file, it's overloaded. It looks like that the priority is my let me see here. So I'm going to need to go secret for a second because I want to. The unfortunate thing about this test is that if it fails, it will actually say, "Oh, here's what I found," and that's actually my real ID. So hold on a second. I'm going to check out actually what happened here. Yeah, so it did read my actual, instead of reading from the property file. So if let me clear this. And if I do that, so the problem with sometimes with the Spring documentation is that it's not always clear. So okay, so that test passed. So let's go back to my full display. So the docs here say properties are considered in the following order. That's a bit ambiguous. What it is saying is that anything earlier on will override and take priority over anything lower down. So that means my DevTools global settings properties will override and take priority over any of these other ones. So if I have something in my application properties file, this will be overridden by anything above it, which makes sense, right? So I may have something in my application properties file that's overridden by some OS environment variable, which may be overridden by some Java system property. And certainly, right, so certainly you'd want then anything that is overridden by, sorry, a little glitch there with my Luna display. So anything that's overridden sort of makes sense, right? I'd want environment properties to override something in a config file. I'd want something in my command line arguments, because I'm explicitly passing that, to override anything that's in my environment. So that's all good. So what I have here now is I actually just moved off my dev properties, so that way it's not reading it. And so now, and I'll move that back later once we get closer to testing. So now if I run this, we can see that it's reading it from the application files. And so we can, and these are more temporary tests. These are not tests that I'm going to keep around. So there's this idea of ephemeral tests that gets talked about sometimes, but I actually don't think it gets enough attention. There are things you may write to figure out, am I doing this right? Is this the way, correct, sort of match with my thinking? When I'm playing around with things, I tend to write tests as opposed to just writing code, because tests tell me if my expectations are met or not. And so this test will hang around a bit just while we're playing around with it, but once we actually get all the Twilio stuff up and working, then I'm going to basically delete this. Oh, I forgot to turn on my Pomodoro timer. I keep forgetting to do that. So we're actually coming up on a Pomodoro break. So just in general, my schedule is I do a Pomodoro and then a short break. So Pomodoro is about 25 minutes. The breaks are set to 5 minutes, but I keep them, when I'm doing live streaming, I keep them to more like a minute or two. I do a longer break sort of later on. So okay, so that all passed. That means right now it's reading, this test is now reading from our application properties file right here. And that's all good. Okay, so that takes care of our Twilio configuration. So now we have access to this. So that's a bit about our config. So our config's all set up, so our application can read in those properties that it needs. Something else that we'll want is the phone number that it will be recognized and valid for getting an incoming balance request. As I mentioned last time, eventually that will become part of a user's profile, right? So my son will have his user profile that marks him as the role of a child. So he'll have limited access to things, but he'll be able to request balance through an SMS text message, and it will have his phone number associated with that. So that way, if a request comes in from his phone number, it'll send back the balance. If a phone request comes in from an unknown phone number, it will basically just ignore it. We don't even want to respond because we don't. There's really no reason to respond, and it's actually a sort of a security, hole if you basically indicate that somehow there's some application behind the scenes that's actually responding. So what we want to do is, at least for now, put into a configuration file, and we'll put it into application properties. We'll put in something about, we want, I don't know, phone number. So authorized phone number. I'll put in a temporary number for now. So the idea is that this phone number will be the one that's recognized. Not sure if I want to put. We'll have to figure out where this property is going to be read from once we get there. But that's basically what we'll do is we'll have it in a config file. Could have also basically hard coded it in the app. That's not all that much different. All right, so let's see. So when we left off last time, we were doing our planning for the Twilio. We already added a dependency to the Twilio SDK, so we're going to be using that for our Twilio stuff. We've created our config file, we've updated our application properties file, and we've added tests. So let's go ahead and commit this. Basically, added support for Twilio with configuration and SDK import. And this is episode, I forget what episode we're at, 13? Yeah, 13. That was weird. Not sure why I reset that. So we'll just commit this. I won't push it. Yeah, I'll push it at the end of the day. I feel like I should have some Valentine's Day content or something like that, but I'm not that organized with that stuff. Okay, so what's next? So what we want to do is we want to figure out, and so I'll bring up my typical diagram for the architecture that we're following, right? So we're following the hexagonal architecture. And so the hexagonal architecture says that in our domain we have this the core concepts that are let me size this. Oops. Right, so this is our core domain here. And so what we want is we're going to be implementing this external notification stuff right here. And so what we want though is we actually want incoming and outgoing. So it'll be more like a driven adapter, but the idea still is that we'll want a facade to handle this. If we were only going external, we definitely want a facade, basically that represents the internal port, and then hook up a real thing. But since this is an incoming request, it'll be treated more like an adapter. So we want to create an SMS adapter. So let's do that. Let me close my version control. And so this will be a new package. So we'll start with our tests. So we'll go new Java class. So new Java class, and this is going to be in our adapter SMS, and this will be SMS balance check test. Yes. So this is going to be a test, and so the process that I generally work with is there's sort of two layers to thinking about my application testing when I'm in development. There's the outermost, which is dealing with the story, and so you might think of this as BDD or behavior-driven development or acceptance test-driven development or something like that. But the idea is that that's at the more business functional level, and I want to have something that is my higher level goal. Once I have that set up, then I dive into the smaller cycle of doing TDD. So this is going to be more my sort of BDD level thing. What do I want from from the application? I want to be able to, and so often we use the given, when, then formula. So if I go to my BDD stories. So these are all the interest credit stories. Let me rename this. So this is going to be BDD stories interest credit. And I'll create a new one, not a new Scratch file, just a new file. Control-Shift-N. One of the things I try to do when I'm going to do something that has a shortcut associated that I haven't used in a while, even though I could have selected the menu choice, I actually escaped it and chose the menu option, in this case Control-Shift-N. The more you use things, obviously, the easier it is to remember because you're able to recall. But it's something you've sort of forgotten, haven't used in a while, you want to go through the motions of using the keyboard shortcut, even though I had already brought up the menu. So this is going to be BDD stories, and this is for SMS balance check. And this is just a text file. So the first story, and we may only have one, we'll see what, they're probably going to be like two main scenarios. So given a message of balance comes in from a known phone number, actually that's not our given, so it's when this is interesting. So what would the given be here? What's the environment? I mean, given the application is running. I guess it's just given the account has a balance of $23.95, then a text is sent back with so basically if we start out with a balance of $23.95, when we get a message balance and it comes in from a known phone number, I'm kind of highlighting that there, your balance is $23.95. We can also do, when a message comes in from an unknown phone number, then log it and do nothing. So that's sort of the scenario of the message balance comes in, and maybe the last scenario is when any message other than balance comes in from a known phone number, then send text back, didn't understand message, send balance for current balance. Right, so the idea is if somebody sends in a message, maybe he mistyped balance, it'll say, sorry, I didn't understand that, and send this for the current balance. We could have some variants, maybe shortcuts like, BAL is okay. And really, we don't care what message comes in from an unknown phone number, so really it's when any message comes in. So we'll log it. We'll log message and phone number because we get the incoming phone number. We get the phone number from which the SMS came from, and do nothing. And if in this case, this is sort of help. And we can have some other stories here, but that we'll start with this one. So what we can do is we can start out with just some text. We don't actually maybe care what text came in. We can just start with something and send back the balance. So what that will look like is we'll have, so we can go back to our test here. So we're going to have, it's going to be some kind of controller class, but it's not going to, and I guess it's going to be a REST controller. So now I think we need to hop back over to how does Twilio work in this regard. So what we want to do, let's see, not this window, this window. So we want to receive and reply to inbound SMS messages. So what happens is when we get an incoming message, Twilio will send an HTTP request and basically, what's called a webhook, right? So it's going to do an API call to our webhook. So what is that webhook? We don't care about creating it. We don't care about, so responding. We want to respond. So we can see from this example app, would have been nice if it just said like, here's the URI I expect, but so we define the URI, and we'll go to that. But the idea is that we're going to get either application XML or application JSON posted to some endpoint. We can use SMS as our endpoint, and in our body will be the message. Let's see. So this is, I'm not sure what this is showing. Respond to incoming message. Oh, I see. So it's sort of like, it's actually not looking at whatever the request is. It's basically sending back a response. And so it builds a response with a message. So that's interesting. Okay. So when your Twilio phone number request, Twilio send an HTTP request to your server. So let's set up my app to receive messages. So this is just ngrok, which is pretty standard, right? So what we want to do is the Twilio servers are going to basically, we want to call our local server, right? So we're going to have Twilio, a message comes in, and it's going to trigger a call, basically an HTTP post onto our server. And we can use ngrok, so that way, because normally you wouldn't have some random internet connection coming into your server. And so ngrok provides a way to basically provide a proxy that, so ngrok will take the call that Twilio sends and then basically call our server. So we'll have to get that set up. But what we want to do is we want to simulate what Twilio sends in so that we can respond correctly. So let's see. Okay, so we want to configure our configure with webhooks twiml, and we're going to set up our what URI it's going to post to. So basically we need to decide on what URL we want Twilio to send the message to. So we're going to basically set up, from the Spring side, we're going to set up a REST controller that's going to respond to a post to something like /API/SMS. Let's say it does something like that. So we'll have so let's create a test. Incoming message from Twilio should respond with current balance. Or balance request SMS, something like that. And so the idea is, and we'll use the mock MVC stuff. So we can look at our this will become sort of more of an integration test to start with. So we can do like this, and it'll be something like this post. So something like that. So we'll paste this, and then we'll paste this. So the idea is if an incoming request comes to API SMS, we'll have to figure out what the thing is, and we'll expect status is okay. We'll figure out what else to assert at that point. But so the idea is we're going to expect Twilio to call this API with some parameters. We need to figure out what those parameters are. And then we expect something to happen that we can detect. Actually, we'll want to examine what it sends back, because that is presumably the response. That's a good question. So it's a bit unclear. So we want to receive and reply to an inbound message. So it expects a response in TWIML telling us how to respond. Okay, so we can go ahead and look at the TWIML stuff. And basically TWIML is just a specific XML document with special tags. So I gotta say this documentation is kind of sucky. The reason why is and this is a common thing I see in documentation, is sort of mixing two things. Like I want to know information about, like, how does this work at a high level? Like, what is going to come in? What do I expect? And how do I return it? The problem is it mixes in stuff around a tutorial for Spark, and like I don't want to use Spark. I want to use Spring Boot. Or any other thing. And so I would have liked to have had a bit more help here. So really the important stuff is that this body message and messaging response are actually Twilio things. So what we want to be able to do is create this TWIML. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, we can basically copy this part of the code, put it into a test, and see what it does. So let's do that. So this is just a temp test. Right, so this is one of those ephemeral tests. So we're going to say this stuff, and we can see that it imported the TWIML stuff automatically, which is kind of nice. And we can say assign this thing to a variable, and this is TWIML XML. And we can assert something about the TWIML XML is not empty, or equal. So I do this a lot. Like if I want to see, like, well, what is this string going to be? I have no idea. Let me just fix up the formatting here. So basically, we have a builder for the body, we have a builder for the message, and then we have a builder for the response. So the body holds, so the message goes inside the body, and then the response itself goes inside the message. That seems pretty straightforward. And I don't know what it's going to be, so I know this is going to fail, but then I'll be able to see what the output is. So that'll be useful to see what it looks like. So let's make this bigger. So pretty straightforward XML. Basically, there's the XML header. It's inside of a response, the message, the body, and then this is basically the body of the text. So when we build it, we're basically, so the outermost thing, I guess, is the response, which contains a message, which contains a body, and we are basically going to be returning application XML. Okay. So that means if we want to assert, when we call the thing, when the balance is whatever the balance is, we can now So what we still don't know is what is the post coming in? What do we get from the API? And here, this doesn't tell us. This has no information about. So it's responding to an incoming message, but I want to know, what is that message? Sorry, Luna display is really acting up today. I'm not sure why. Let's see. Can we get more details about? That's the message service. TWIML. How to receive and reply to SMS. How is this different from what we were just looking at? Wow, okay, that's confusing. So I guess there's the quick start, but then there's a tutorial. Quick start wasn't very helpful, so let's look at the tutorial and see if it helps us. Yeah, we saw the TWIML. We saw this. Is this just the same thing? Yeah, this is just the same thing. What I want to know though is what comes in the request, because I need to figure out, right, the two things we need are what was the originating phone number and did it have the text balance in it. Custom responses to incoming SMS. So it looks like body is one of the parameters. But I want to know, so that's an add-on. I want to know what is the full thing that Twilio is going to send. Like, I don't want to have to do this manually. Well, let's take a look at this one. So cookies with webhooks. I don't care about cookies. That's conversation data. That might be useful later, but I don't really care. What I really want to know is on the request. Okay. It would be nice if this were more easily documented. So it looks like there's body, from, and to. So it would be nice if they gave me like a DTO, because what we're going to do is we're going to create a DTO that will automatically convert the incoming stuff. So it looks like there's body, which has the message, from, that has the phone number from which it came from, to would presumably be our phone number that we don't really care about. Let's see. So I guess let's look at the API reference. So that's our base URL. So this will be useful to save, but we don't need that because presumably the SDK has that information. It's like I don't actually want the API documentation. I want the SDK documentation. Like, where is the SDK documentation for? I guess let's go to SDKs. Custom HTTP clients for the Twilio. So I have no idea why I'd want a proxy server. Oh, to authenticate. Well, I don't need to go across a proxy server. So how about just give me the basic SDK docs, please? Yeah, I got that. Installed it. Yeah, it's creating a message. Authenticate client. Create a new record. Get an existing record. This is, it's like, I want a full round trip information. What class am I going to use for, I don't want to make a call. So messaging API. I feel like I'm going around in circles here. Check out our messaging API documentation. All right, what is the message resource? So represents an inbound or an outbound message. And message properties. Okay, so this is what I want. I want and like I saw mention of this Twilio REST client, but I'm not sure if I want to use that. But I guess we'll worry about that later because right now it's basically responding to a post. So what is coming in is going to be body and direction doesn't seem useful. The from I guess that's all I care about, right, is the body and the from. So let's try that. So let's take, so this is going to be body, which is our message, and it's going to be something like balance. And then the from is going to be the phone number. So my fake phone number that I wanted, that's authorized, is going to be 650-555-1212. So we expect that the status is okay. We'll actually be able to do some more checking than just that. So what we want to do is we want to write a thing that responds to a post request that Twilio is going to send us. It's going to have some other junk in it, but basically we're concerned with body, which is going to be the contents of the text message that comes in, and from, which is the phone number, sort of meta information about the message. Okay, so given that, I have no idea what message feedback resource is. User reported outcome. That doesn't seem important. All right. Source code, pre-built jar. I guess I will look at the JDK Docs. So let's go here. Okay, so what have we got? We've got that's examples. Converter. What does converter do? Well, that's not helpful. It looks like it converts a map to a JSON string. Okay. Come on, Twilio folks. Why aren't you documenting this stuff? Like, what is class promoter? Do I need it? I have no idea. Give me like a one-sentence description of what this thing is. Thank you. HTTP. So this looks like where the client stuff is. I'm already using my own client. REST API 2010, so incoming phone number. Yeah, I just don't have enough information to know where to look here. There's TWIML. All right, well, this isn't terribly helpful. So let's do this. Let's go back to here, and so we can generate the TWIML. We know how to do that. And what we want to do is we want to go to our console number page, and so let's set up ngrok. Did I download this already? Let's see. All right, so let me log in. I think I have an account. No, I don't have an account. I guess I'll log in with GitHub. Yes, that's why I'm trying to log in with GitHub. Fine, you want me to log in with Google? I'll log in with Google. All right. So let's download this because I don't already have it. We'll download that. We'll unzip it. And so basically it's a command line thing. So let's go ahead and drop down to here. Is it going to create a subdirectory? So okay, well, it's just a binary, so that's fine. All right, so what we want to do is we would now want to basically get an auth token. So I'm going to go secret for a second and get that set up. Basically, we're going to want to set up a port tunnel so that Twilio can talk to ngrok, and then ngrok can talk to our local server, and we can basically see what we get when a message comes in. Because we think it's going to be body and from among other things, but it's a bit unclear where that information is. So let me go secret for a second and get my auth token for this. All right, so unzip, connect to my account. So where do I get my ngrok token from? There it is. So ngrok auth token and my secret token. All right. And so now if I do, cool, okay. Let's go to status. Cool, okay, now I can go back to the full display. All right, so what I have now is ngrok is up and running. And so what it's doing is it's basically saying it's exposed this address to my localhost 8080, and we'll run that, and that means we can put this into Twilio's configuration for its webhook, so we can tell Twilio where to send the information. So that's in our console's number page. So let's go there. And sorry, I'm going to have to go secret again. I just want to make sure I'm not exposing information that I don't want people to see. Okay, so let's go edit this number. And when a call comes in, that's when a call comes in. I don't care about a call. Okay, I can show this. So here's the configuration page for the phone number. What we want is we want to be able to configure it. So it's a webhook. So when a message comes in, a webhook to this, looks like there are a bunch of other options. You can actually run sort of functions on Twilio's servers, but we're going to have it basically go here. So that's the URI. That's the basic domain. And we're saying that it's going to go to API SMS, and it's going to do a post. Right, because now ngrok is running, so it'll forward that to localhost 8080. So we'll save that. And so now, so here it's showing the tunnel is set up. Oh, I guess it sets up an HTTP and an HTTPS. That's kind of nice. Now what we want to do is in our app, let's go and create a quick and dirty so this is going to be a different adapter. So we're going to create our, it's going to be in our SMS package, and this is going to be our SMS controller. So this is going to be a REST controller, and it's going to and we're going to want request mapping. And so what we want is path. The default path is API SMS. Actually, we'll just leave it like this. And we'll create a post mapping. And so the post mapping will respond to SMS. And so this is going to be, we'll just return a string. Incoming SMS. Since we don't quite know what it is yet, we'll just basically expect a map of strings to strings, which is call it map for, and then we can just dump the map and return just an empty string. I don't care if Twilio doesn't like an empty string, it'll have to deal with it. So the idea is, well, this is really just for test purposes, right? So we've got it as a REST controller. And so let's make sure this works from our test. So if we go to API SMS, we expect this. So we expect this test to work. I am missing some annotations for the test itself. So I'm going to run with that. It's a Spring Boot test. And I'm sure I can narrow this down to just the testing that one controller, but we'll just run this. So we're going to run this test. So basically, this is just did it dump what I expect? Did I call it correctly? Because this is what we told Twilio. What we'll then do is actually hit the ngrok endpoint just to make sure that our ngrok to our local application stuff is working. Okay, so that worked fine. And oh darn it, I closed it. Oh well, that's all right. So now if we run the application, we should be able to hit this /API/SMS endpoint through the ngrok one. And we can use something like Postman. Okay, so the app is up and running. And so we want to make basically a request. We don't need that. We're just going to make so I want to basically make just want a new request. So new request. I don't want to save this. I just want like a new one. Okay, how do I clear? Okay, fine. I'll just do it manually. So we'll do this. So we accept. So we'll actually accept application XML. I actually don't know what it's going to send, but I guess we'll drop that out. The body, I'll just say body equals balance, do something like that. Okay. I don't really care about the contents or whether it processes the post content correctly. I just want to make sure it hits it. So if we go here, that's funny. So it's actually running the application, but we don't want to go there. So let's go and put that here, and it was API SMS. And so if we send it, then our response is empty. That's cool. Our headers, that's all cool. And now we can look at our stuff here. We basically see the map was empty here, although it should have at least parsed the content. Oh, I guess because I had it raw as opposed to X whatever form URL encoded. Let's try that. So body. So say body is balance, and from is 650-555-1212. All right, let's send that. So it's not dumping the contents of the map. Oh, probably because I forgot the annotation on the method. So let's go to our controller and request body. Right, because what we want is basically this method parameter should be bound to the body, otherwise it was basically ignored. Okay, so let's restart that. And so this is why I tested this part, because yeah, because I want to make sure that works. All right, so let's try it again. Content type not supported. Okay, fine. Let's make it. What did I hit? Oh, because I said. That's interesting. Why did it like that? Oh, because by default it should be JSON. So, all right, so let's make it JSON. That's fine. We'll accept XML as a response, and our body is going to be JSON. Oops. So we'll basically say body is balance, right? Because that's what we expect is the text of the message, and then from is, and I'm presuming it's going to be the standard format 555-1212. Okay, So let's send that. And there we go. Okay, so we know that this is working. We can access it through ngrok.io to API/SMS. So that's all working. So we have our server running. We have ngrok pointing to it. We have Twilio configured to point to ngrok. And now what we want to do is I'd like to have I'd like to now either simulate or actually send a text message to the phone number and have that come in. I'm not sure a good way of doing that. All right, so my Pomodoro timer just went off, so let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll look at does Twilio supply any way to simulate sending a text message? If not, I'll have to actually send a real one. All right, see you in a couple. So one of the things that I was looking for was a way to trigger the API call so that I can get the information, so that I can see that Twilio is sending the right information. I did come across this, which it would have been nice if this were easier to find. So this is telling me what the request to my application looks like. But it was kind of buried under the overview for TWIML. Like that should have been, so it's telling me the information that I kind of guessed, basically that it's sending it as a form URL encoded. And then here are the parameters, and as we guessed, the ones we're interested in is basically the body and the from. These other ones are interesting for checking status, but we actually don't care about that. What I do want though is I want to trigger the API without. I'd like to trigger it without actually triggering it with my own phone. And Twilio does have this idea of test credentials, but that doesn't seem to be quite what I'm looking for. So Twilio test webhook SMS receive message. So I definitely want to include webhook. But I want a way of triggering it without actually sending one. But I wasn't able to find any easy way to do that. I could find ways to simulate sending it, but I couldn't figure out how to send it. So so what I want to do is I don't want to dump the map because I'm going to be sending it from my phone number, and I don't want my phone number to be exposed to this video. So what I guess I'm going to do is, instead of dumping the entire map, let's go ahead and create a DTO that will serve as our basically easily binding the variables that we want. So we'll go ahead and create a new Java class, and this is going to be our Twilio incoming request. I know incoming requests are kind of redundant, but it makes it more clear to me. And we're going to do some Lombok stuff to make it easy. So we'll basically do, we'll just say data. Right, because data, for those of you who haven't used Lombok much, will provide getters and setters, required args constructor, toString equal hash code, right? So that's pretty standard for a DTO Java bean. So we're going to want a private string that consists of the body, and then another private string that is the from, and what else? Is there anything else that we actually need from this data? we get the message SID. Yeah, let's get that. Okay, so then what we want to do is in our controller, instead of using a map, we're actually going to have what is this? I guess this is just the request. So it's going to be a Twilio incoming request object, and it's just the request. And then what we can do is we can pull out of that. We can say from, and then request dot get from, and I'm only going to show the first few numbers, so substring beginning at 0 and length of 4. So that way we can see that a phone number did come in, and then we can see the body of the message, and we'll surround it with quotes. And then we'll print out the message SID. Oops. So get the message SID. May as well return that TWIML stuff that we had working in our test. So let's go back to our test and see what that looked like. So before we do that, let's add one parameter here, which is the message SID. Is that how it was spelled? Yes. And this is just some random thing. Not that I think it matters, but these start with uppercase, I guess. So what we want is we want to basically copy this stuff, because this is the stuff that we're going to return. And we can delete this test because that was just our ephemeral temporary test. Go back to our controller as TWIML 2595, something like that. So we can put this into a and we'll return that. Your balance is plus S. Yes, that's fine. Okay. Eventually, we'll put this somewhere else, but right now we'll keep it here. Okay. So that's our controller. We'll dump that and we'll return that, and let's see what happens. So let's restart it. Except, okay, so it definitely is going to be sending in the form URL encoded. And if you noticed before when we were doing that with Postman, Spring complained because it was expecting, I guess, something else. We need to say content. What is the content type? MVC REST form URL encoded post content type. So where is that? Let's go to the Spring Boot Docs. So we actually want the Spring MVC docs. So let's go there. That's old, but we'll start there. Probably hasn't changed. So URL encoded. No, this stuff is too old. So let's see, we want annotated controllers, declaration, request mapping, handler methods. Mapping. Consumable media types. Okay. Okay, so it's just consumes. Okay. So what we want to say is, so this is our path, and this consumes application. What is that? So we can just say media type, actually. Media type and application form URL encoded. Okay. So actually, let's go back to our using Postman. So let's restart this. Let's go back to using Postman. Have it post a form data, and make sure the header for this matches. Yes, the body. That's cool. Message SID. Some message SID. Okay, so we're all started. So we're posting, send. So why is this not working? I must be missing something really simple, because I am doing exactly this. Right, and request body binds it. All right, I'm doing something stupid. Spring MVC form URL encoded. Do I not use request body? Huh, okay, so I guess we don't need this for parsing of that. All right, let's try that again. Is it because it's not? Oh, I'm not sure. I'll have to research that offline. All right, let's try this again. Send this. Okay, that's interesting. So I guess request body is incompatible with is incompatible with this stuff. Okay, I don't know. I forget. There must be a reason why I'm not remembering. Okay, all right. So we know that this works. So we know that our incoming SMS takes an incoming request. We know that we're parsing it correctly. We can look at the response that we got back, And here's the XML. I misspelled balance. I just corrected that before it finished restarting. Okay, so we now have tested Postman with what we think is going to look like the Twilio request. So I'm going to go use my phone and send a text message to that endpoint. So, and I'm going to say balance. Okay. Well, unfortunately, what I got back was, that's kind of funny. So it worked and was actually quick, but I was actually returning, I guess it thought I was returning, I should probably say produces XML, because what I got in my text message result was literally, let me copy this. No, I want to. Basically, I got back the actual XML instead of the body part of the XML. So close but no cigar. So let's go ahead and say, I mean, what's interesting is then why do I bother sending back TWIML at all? Why don't I just return the contents of the message? Like, do I have to return TWIML? So that's request parameters, responding to Twilio. When a message comes in, Twilio makes an HTTP request. In your response, you can tell Twilio what to do. So, yeah, so I guess what happened was it assumed it was text plain and responded that way. We actually want to do application XML. So that way it interprets the XML properly. All right, so let's fix that. So we want to say produces media type dot, and this is going to be XML, application XML. Okay. Okay. So let's restart. And we're up and running. So I will send another text message. And so that worked perfectly on the phone end. And we can see here's the body of the text message that I sent. We can see that this is just the first four digits, or actually first four characters of the standard E164 phone number, which always includes a +1, basically plus the area code. Sorry, country code in the United States happens to be 1. Okay, so what we've tested so far, which really took so much longer than it should have, I feel like a better solid example from Twilio would have really helped. Okay, so we've set up ngrox, that way Twilio can talk to us without us having to deploy onto Heroku or something else, so it allows us to iterate quicker. So that works. We get the expected content, that works. We know what it is, we can respond with a proper XML message, that works. So now we're very specific about what our expectations are. So now let's clean up our stuff. So now we've sort of gotten, we know what's going on. So what we can do now is make this a proper controller. So let's rename this. We'll call this balance in TWIML. We do have an encoder somewhere for converting this because remember our balance is stored as pennies, and so we need to convert that to dollars. We have a converter in our web one, so we might want to actually move that up to be available to all adapters. So that is the scale decimals method, decimal to pennies. So that returns decimal to pennies. Our account controller, though, when we request the balance, oh, so we have format as money on our transaction view class. This format as date and format as money. So format as date takes a date time and returns it as a nice string from browser data. So let's actually move these out, and then we can move these up to make them available for all adapters. So let's go ahead and move this so this is, we're moving the format as date, so we'll move that to date formatting. And the format as money, we'll move that to scale decimals. That's no longer a great name. Just wondering what to call this class. I'm not happy with this class name. Also, this should be private. All right, well, all right, so we'll leave that for now. And what we'll do is we'll move these up. So date formatting and scale decimals are fairly generic to all adapters. So we'll go ahead and move that up to just adapter. And let's run all our tests to make sure that we haven't broken anything. I'm just going to run the unit test. We'll run the integration test in a bit. And yes, my Pomodoro timer expired, but I'm just going to push through. Oh, oops, my SMS balance check test should actually be moved into an integration test, so my bad. I'm assuming that's what's taking so long right now. Yes, so let's move that because that is actually a full Spring Boot test. So let's move this to the integration test scope. And okay. We'll be able to change this once we, now that we have a better idea of what we want from it. We'll be fixing. This is the test we'll wanting to run. Why did it fail? 415. Oh, because it was only expecting form URL encoded, and we didn't say that content type. So let's do that. Media type, and we're saying form URL encoded. Where is it? Dot application. So application form URL encoded. That's this one. Okay. Now that test should pass, but now it's in our integration test, so that's cool. So let's run all our unit tests again. Okay, so all our unit tests pass. Our integration test, now that one of them that we just wrote is failing, although now it should pass because I just fixed the problem. And so now, so I ran all the tests because I just moved some classes around. I want to make sure that even though it was an automated refactor, I want to make sure that I didn't break anything. And so now what we want to expect is not just that the status is okay, right, although that's part of it. We also expect that the body content Darn it, what is it? And so what I want to check is that the body returns a specific content. And I forget how to do that. Again, this is sort of the problem with these Hamcrest style matches is it's not discoverable. Like these things, like redirected URL and model, they're not discoverable. Like I have to know that they're in some package somewhere, and I just want to basically get the body out. So I'm assuming it's some mock MVC result matcher. Result matchers. And it's one of these. It's not, is it content? Access to response bodies. Okay, so I guess it's content. And then string. Okay, so basically I want something like this. I want content string contains string. And I want it to contain your balance. And let's statically import that. Why is that not working? Where is contain string? So we can import that static method. We want, this is a result matcher. Oh, right, because it's string contains string. And so that is a matcher. Yeah, I really dislike these style of matchers, these Hamcrest styles, because really there's no way that I could have discovered this without looking at the documentation, so it's really kind of annoying. Okay, so now we can actually run this test and we can actually examine that, the response. We can do a little bit more about the response, but this is just an integration test. We'll fill it out more, right? Because the idea is that we want, go back to our story, given that the balance is a certain amount, so we'll have to set up the initial balance to be a certain value, and then we can set that the text sent back was this, and let's see. Let's do a deposit. So we'll do a deposit of $23.95. And then we expect that it's going to say your balance is $23.95. And more specifically, it's going to be inside of the body tag, right? So if we look at the docs here, that's going to be inside of message. So we could just surround it by message to be really sure that that's what we want. So that, and then surrounded by that. Okay. So this now represents our outer level, story level BDD-like test, right? So given that we have $23.95 in our account, we expect that when we do a post with the request for the balance from this phone number, that we expect an OK and that the body coming back contains this message. So we can run this. Let's actually make it a different amount because we want to make sure that it's not something we hard-coded. So let's say 99.95 or 98.95. Sure, why not? All right, so if we run this test, and this is an integration test because this is running the whole thing, this will take a little longer. So let me take a quick break. So I ran this integration level test, and we saw that it failed basically because we expected the string to contain this specific message with 98.95. So it looks like actually, oh, it wraps it in body first, but that doesn't matter because it's wrong anyway. So we actually can say not just contain string, but actually is equal to this full string. So let's do that. Let's actually make it a full response. So let's take the whole thing and we can take out the contain string because we're no longer doing contains. What we want is this whole thing, but actually we want it to be the amount that we had deposited as part of this test, so 98.95. Okay. Cool, so that fails, that's great. So now we have an outer failing test. Now what we want to do is go ahead and go to our controller. And so now we want to flesh out this controller. So what we want to do is we need to inject the reference to account so that way this controller can have access to what the current balance is. So let's do that. We'll go and private final. This is going to be our account. Create a constructor for that. Auto-wired. And so now what we can do is we'll delete that text printout stuff. We can say int balance equals account dot balance. And then this is going to be the scale decimals, basically format as money balance. And so now what we have is the actual proper balance. We're not looking at the request yet, so we'll look at that because that's part of our story is that it must come from a known number. But here we're just going to return the balance. So if we run the test again, hopefully it'll pass. Oh, it failed. So why did it fail? Okay, it failed because it calculated interest calculation. Darn you. So I mentioned this yesterday where we might want to make the interest calculator that we currently have as an interface, right? So that's here in our domain, our interest strategy. We might want to actually make the monthly interest strategy right now. It's not a Spring component, and so therefore the dependency injection stuff doesn't happen, and so we're in full control over it. But it does mean we're running tests and we want to not have what just happened, which is that there's interest and that's throwing off, and that's why the test failed. We'd like to be able to substitute and mock that out. So it'll be easier once we do that. Did I add that as a Trello thing? So let's see. Where's my Trello? Here it is. So what I want is I want to make the interest strategy, yeah, so I need to do that. So make interest strategy a component so we can substitute or mock during integration tests. Okay, and we're going to need to do that like pretty soon. Let's see how we're doing, by the way. So we added environment variables for Twilio credentials. I haven't tested that out, but we did. But we did put this in configuration, so that's basically done. And we put the SMS phone number as configuration, so that's basically done. Okay. All right. So where are we? We are. So we can fix this test by basically making the date today, so February 14th. And now if we run it, this will pass, so I'm not going to run it. Basically, we are getting an actual balance, so that's all that matters. Now, if we go back to our story, we're not quite done because basically a balance request message coming in from anywhere, we're going to give whoever happened to text in the message. So what we want to do is we want to basically now limit it so that the response only goes to if the request comes in from an authorized known phone number. So if we go back to our stories, that's this part. So we sort of did the rest of this, and now we need to narrow it down so it's from a known phone number. So this is our top level test. We can now write some more unit-like tests, right? So remember that this is going in through the MVC, right, through the post message, and it's simulating the service actually running. But the controller itself, this is just a class. We can instantiate it, and we can call incoming SMS with an instance of this request, and it should do the right thing. So let's go ahead and actually write now a unit test for this. So I'll go and create an SMS request balance test, balance request test, sure. And that goes in our regular test directory. And so from unknown number should, and so the question is if we return nothing, does it, I guess Twilio doesn't do anything? So if we return an empty message, is that okay? I'm not sure. I guess we'll find out. So from unknown, it should return empty response. So we'll need to create an account. So account, new, ugh, wrong account. That's going to be really annoying because it's trying to auto import. There happens to be an account object from there, but that's not what I want. So let's go ahead and import that one. And I want to say new. So this takes a transaction repository, so we can just say a new fake transaction repository. Put that into a variable. So now we need to create a request object. So this new var, and so we can set the, so this is the incoming request, so this should be balance. and we want to set message SID doesn't matter, and the from is going to be some unknown number. So we can say 212.555.1212. We don't need to set the message SID because that doesn't matter. Okay, so that's our setup, and now when so we also need to create an SMS controller, and it takes an account, assign that to a variable, and so now when we call SMS controller incoming SMS with our request, we expect that the response is empty. So if we run this, this will actually fail because right now we're just returning the balance no matter who's asking for it. Good, and it actually shows that the balance was 0, which makes sense because it's a new account and we didn't deposit anything, so that's all fine. Okay, so we want this test to pass. Let me actually put this in. This is from unknown number because we want to give this a name to say this really is an unknown number. We could even put it as a constant. And this can be private. Okay. So we can make this fail pretty easily. If we go here and we basically just return an empty string, that'll make that test pass, right? Which would then force us to create another test where, so test from known authorized number should return balance message. That should be return. So we'll have pretty similar setup. What will be different is that it's going to be from the known number. And that known number, the known number is currently coming from a config file, but I'll just say this is 650.555.1212, that's the known number. I'll actually have to pull that from the config file. So if it's from the known number, then when we get the response, we can assert that the response contains your balance is 0. So now if we run both these tests, one of them will fail. Right, so from unknown, it's correct, it doesn't return anything. From known, it's still returning empty when it should return that. So now we can go ahead and go back to our SMS controller. If we just do that, and then we run the test again, we'll see that, well, now we've flipped that. Now the test that was failing now passes, the one that was passing now fails. So we now need to look at the request. So if if request get from is equals otherwise we'll return an empty string. So this thing will have to get from a config file, so we'll have to get that property from our config file. And we said we put that in our application properties. So that's authorized phone number. But for now, we'll hard code it. So now if we run our tests, they should both pass. Cool. What we also said was actually if it comes in from an unknown number, so if we go back to our story, if it comes in from an unknown number, then we log it. So this annotation, this SLF for J, basically gives us a logger, so we don't have to manually create it. And so we can say logger info message from unknown number, message from unknown number, and so it's basically request, and this is the body, and request, and this is the from. And so if we run our tests, we can see that we got a logger basically right here. Whether this should be info or not is another question, but I'll leave that for another day. It's not a warning. I mean, it's not a warning because it's not really a big problem. It's just information that I might want to look at logs later to see, oh, what number did it actually come in from? All right. If we go back now to our stories, so here we have, given the account has a balance, when it comes in from a known phone number, we send back the text, otherwise we do nothing. We have this last one, that's a sort of a nice to have, but I'm already over time, so I'm going to basically call that one. We'll do that next time. So there's going to be some cleanup that we'll have to do next time. The other thing that we're going to have to do is actually pull this from our config file instead of hard coding it. So let's put that in our Trello. So pull known number from config, and we also want to what else? Oh, well, then we want to actually deploy this for real, right? So I want to deploy this to Heroku and then point Twilio to it. So put Twilio config into Heroku. So what's interesting is actually because we're responding to a message, we actually didn't have to use the SID, right, base layer authentication token and stuff. So that's actually kind of nice. So I guess we'll use that next time when the system wants to initiate sending a message. Because here it's just responding to one that comes in, which turns out to be easier. So actually we don't need to put the Twilio config in because the request balance comes in. Okay, so we don't need to do that. We do want to, though, deploy to Heroku and repoint Twilio to Heroku. And we'll do that. All right, so I think we'll call it. We have, we're a good part of the way there, right? There wasn't actually a lot of code. We'll want to clean this up because what I want to do is I don't want this code here. I want it in some response DTO object that knows how to convert itself into proper XML. And we'll clean this up a bit next time. But if we run all our tests, so all our unit tests pass, and I think this test, sorry, not that test. all our integration tests. I think they'll pass. So this SMS balance check 1. Oh, this actually is not in the right format. It needs to be +1. So this one will probably fail. Yeah, so that one failed because it was from an unknown number, which was fine. New account view has no transactions. Oh, right, I forgot that I need to label this with dirty transactions, otherwise it writes it to the database, so let's do that. So we'll do that, clean up our imports, and run all our integration tests. And that's it, we'll call it a day. Tomorrow we'll finish cleaning up this code, and what we'll want to do next, so what's up next? So we'll finish this. This will probably take another, Pomodoro to finish cleaning up and deploying. The next thing we're going to want to do is also then, as I mentioned, make the InterStrategy a component so we can take advantage of mocking that. Then I think the next thing is I want to put some simple authentication. So I want to tie basically some kind of user profile to start building up the idea of there's some user profile that has the phone number and sort of what role they are. And that starts getting into some of the authentication and authorization stuff. So we'll look at that next time. All right, and all our tests passed, so we are good. I will commit and push that up. And as usual, you can find the information on my website at tedmyoung.com.